Chapter 2 Upstart. Summer lingered this year, the air staying warm long after dark. Warm air currents rose from the sands late into the evening, making long distance flights across the vast expanse of the dunes possible, even after the light had faded from the sky. Tarko was already taking full advantage of this. The sun had already set, yet the hot air kept his blood warm and his wings inflated. He still tingled with warmth and excitement as the air held him aloft. Carried upward on the warmth wafting from the peak of a dune far below, letting the current carry him even higher. He rolled his shoulders and held his tail out straight like a crimson tree branch. His energetic young flesh was eager for the hunt. The dingy red of his scales kept him warm longer than the rest of the big, winged lizards of his kind. His darker scales helped him absorb the morning's heat faster. He recovered from the cold of night, letting him become mobile sooner than the rest of his cold-blooded brethren. At the moment, he consciously took advantage of his color, the deep red scales, nearly as dark as the night's star-spangled sky, keeping helping keep his body and the ill will it bore hidden. He had left the rest of his clan behind, striking out from their roost of his own volition. He believed many of the others had become slow and weak, exercising too much caution in their old age. Tarko's young and exuberant bloodthirst didn't have the patience for the rules that tried to govern him. Tarko went out hunting against the direct orders of the clan's alphas, intentionally disobeying their explicit instructions. He did something he believed in even more, breaking the standing orders without a second thought. Tarko believed the alphas had become too weak, not capitalizing on the opportunity the late summer afforded them to kill their greatest foes. These foes didn't have a real name. Each member of the clan had a different name for them and a different reason to hate them. He called them softlings, and he yearned for their blood, because they had spilled the blood of his parents. He sought the blood of the strange creatures out here in his desert. These strange little warm-blooded pale things had soft skin and hair. They bore no scales, no shells, no fangs, no claws. Yet hundreds of them survived, living in some strange cave made of some odd material. It was hard like stone, but smoother and flatter, and sounded terrible when scratched with claws. Tarko and the others called it a cave, even though it was not, but they didn't have a better word for it. 3 generations previously, the strange sideways obelisk had just appeared, with the odd pale inhabitants already inside and established. The softlings couldn't fly. The thing they lived in must have risen from the ground. Tarko could think of no other explanation for it, much like its occupants. Surely it couldn't fly. It was much too large and very inert. The strange not cave had proven a good place to roost, for the strange stone grew warm quickly, even in the weak light of the early morning. It grew warm faster than even the best stones on the mountains. The pale softlings lived inside it, but Targo had never seen them on top of it. He had spent several days on top of their domain, watching their comings and goings, without them even knowing. He thought of them as fools, for they only kept watch in one direction. If he just flew past their nest, turned and approached from the far side, to land atop their cave's stones, not Stone Hill, they never noticed. Tarko marveled over the fact that the softlings survived despite their dim obliviousness. Tarko coiled his mind around the softling's hive, unsure of its true nature. He knew it wasn't stone, but he had no better word to describe the material. Not being a hole in the mountain, he couldn't rightly call it a cave. It was strange, artificial, and out of place. It didn't belong, just like the soft, pale things that lived in it. Like a colony of fleshy, squirmy sandworms that died in the sun, if dug up. The hive left an uncomfortable feeling in his gut. The weird way that it stuck out of the sand was just wrong, like it had fallen from the sky. His gut told him it had fallen from above, but that wasn't possible. Mountains didn't fly. Tarko had grown impatient with his clan's alphas. They may be the oldest mating pair in the clan, but that did not guarantee they were the smartest. They hesitated to attack, blinded by an overabundance of caution, he figured. The lingering heat made it so the entire pack could fly out in force to eradicate these strange pale creatures that didn't belong. Yet the alphas did not capitalize on this advantage. They held him back. They held the whole crush back and let the opportunity slip between their talons. Tarko was the quick-witted one, the one committed to his cause. Those pale little creatures had been out there in the dunes for generations, burning things, making noise and light at night. An unnatural, disgusting abomination that ignored the natural day-night cycle of the world. They killed his brethren whenever they got the chance. At first, it was dangerous to get close to their cave. It killed his great-grandfather with thunder. He had fallen from the sky after being struck by noise. Many had died in that manner, though none had in Tarko's lifetime. Gradually, Tarko had overcome the fear of being in proximity to that unnatural place, despite the Alpha's insistence on extreme caution. He regarded the softlings with supreme disgust and earnest contempt. The worst transgression forcing his claws into action was that the softlings had even started spreading beyond their hive. One even lived on its own in the depths of the desert. Others regularly made trips from their cave thing to the canyons to steal the water from the streams. Recently, other hunters spotted them going farther out from their hive, traveling in larger groups that were too dangerous to attack. These wandering groups spending more and more time afield, too. He didn't want them to establish a second infestation somewhere else, spreading like scale rot across the back of the desert. The Alphas had spoken with traveling members of other clans. The other clans had never seen or heard of anything else like the Softlings, no matter how far or wide they had traveled. For the moment, it remained a localized infection, something that, if removed promptly, wouldn't be able to spread further. The Softlings were curiously strange in their nasty way. Smart enough, they could communicate amongst themselves at least. Their bodies were all soft and wrong. They walked on two legs, and they didn't even have tails. They didn't belong here, and Tarko wanted nothing but to make them not be here. He suspected they weren't even safe to eat. As far as he knew, no one had ever tried. He refused to be that foolish. As the warm air currents carried him higher, he calculated his move to the next updraft. He left the air column he had been circulating on, curling one wing slightly as he banked, and let himself fall off the top of the warm air. He sank heavily into the cooler air and lost altitude surprisingly fast. Tarko beat the air with several powerful strokes of his wings before he found the next air column off the peak of another dune. Even warmer and stronger than the previous, it carried him upwards again. Tarko shrugged through the air, with a few more wing beats reaching the pinnacle of the column. He was mentally preparing himself to slip off the air column in search of the next when he spotted the twinkle on the horizon he wanted to see. The faint light flickered in the distance. The fire. The incessant burning of wood was one of the things about those soft-bodied vermin that bothered him most. Now it aided him, a beacon heralding him to their destruction. Tarko understood how precious the trees were. Trees sheltered his prey, and the constant destruction and burning of wood worried him. Tarko used the distant fire like a bright navigational star and homed in on it, twisting his face into a toothy, hungry smirk. With renewed vigor, he tucked a wing again and slipped silently through the night sky, bounding from one column of air to another across the desert, using what heat, still radiating from the sun-baked and sand below, he could find. His eyes lit with the distant firelight. Tarko got himself directly over the bonfire, riding its turbulent air currents high over the cave entrance. The smell of the burning wood overpowered his nose, even from this altitude. He widened his orbit around the superheated air, putting just enough distance between himself and the air column over the fire that he sank slowly through the blackened sky without having to beat his wings, yet close enough to the column that it still kept the broad span of thin membrane sprouting from his shoulders warm and tingly. His flesh nearly quivered with anticipation. He could see the tiny shapes of softlings moving about near the edge of the firelight below. He rolled his head sideways and peered down at them with one of his keen eyes. If he dipped his head to look with both eyes, it would have influenced his flight. He reminded himself of his childhood flying lessons. Body follows the eyes. He could see several of the softlings returning to the cave, slipping out of the darkness like spirits. How they stayed so active through the cold of the night was beyond his understanding. Typically, only the smaller insects were truly nocturnal. Yet, these soft bipeds were always doing something, always had some activity going on. Tarko shook his head, ridding himself of the speculation. Speculation wasn't the reason for his visit. As the softlings mewling about below split up, he chose his target and tucked his wings, holding them wrapped over his body like a sheath. He plummeted from the sky like a murderous meteor. He narrowed his eyes as the increased airspeed tried to dry them out, struggling against the urge to close the inner semi-transparent eyelids, not wanting the blurred vision to cost him. He free fell for only a heartbeat. Too long, and he wouldn't be able to slow down enough without hurting himself. He rolled his shoulders forward to catch the air current in his armpits and let it open his wings again, oozing them back out into the night sky. He didn't snap them all out at once, for that might be catastrophic too. Even as he eased them open, the strain on the thin skin was painful as the tiny membrane stretched over the air, trying to contain his weight. If he had waited too much longer, he would have torn his skin struggling against the air currents. He briefly chastised himself, remembering one of his broodmates who had made that mistake when they were younger and free-fallen from too high and waited too long to open his wings. He tore the membranes from his flesh in a panic, trying to slow down too fast at too low a height, and made a mess of himself on the rocks in the mountains near the nest. Tarko focused on the quickly approaching desert floor and his victims below. The strange pale creatures rotated its small, round, noseless head up to look at him as he dropped low enough for the firelight to reflect off his dark scales, rather than letting the sky's shadows swallow his silhouette. He let the muscles in his wings relax again. He plummeted through the remaining gap onto his victim, letting the small, unarmored body catch his weight. His now deflated wings fell over both of them, enshrouding the victim in a curtain of dark hatred, the last thing the softling would ever see. Tarko, with a flurry of teeth, clamping jaws, and claws, with joyful bloodlust, he set about disassembling his victim. The other small, soft creatures fled and made odd barking noises. Their motion hardly drew his attention as he mauled his victim with a vigor that was somewhere between hunger and hatred, reverence and lust. Eventually, he lowered his wings and brought his head up, reopening his awareness. The smell of their strange, salty liquid secretions wafted through the fire's dancing flames to him. He left one victim and approached the others. His disgust at their oily scent made him only more enraged. Targo kept his head low, just high enough that the scales of his chin didn't touch the broad, flat stone that served as the stage for their death dance. The air was cooling quickly now, and he wanted to take as much heat from the fire and the stone as possible. He used the muscles running down the top of his long neck to lift and lower his head as he nearly slithered across the stone, his jaw mirroring the contours of the rock. He worked his mind, now dazed with bloodlust, to focus through the mental fog of violence and hatred as he approached the strange creatures that he didn't understand, flicking his eyes about to make sure he wasn't being snuck up on. Struggling between his mind and his instincts as he debated on the best way to approach the three before him. They carried sticks, sticks that hurt, and the three of them together gave him pause. Tarko closed the gap and squared them up, deciding to make a leap for the one on the end. He wanted to hurt it and get away before the other two could hit him with their sticks. The one that stood in the middle had a longer stick that made him even more wary. He sank to his haunches and readied himself to pounce, tightening all the muscles in his legs, even coiling his tail like a spring against the rock behind him. As he readied his mind through the fog of bloodshed, a new gust of wind rolled over him. He recognized the uneven blasts of air as someone landed behind him. The air, scolded by the vicious beat of their cold-blooded wings, pushed the flames around, making the light dance erratically with its passing. As it stretched and bent the shadows, Tarko wasn't alone with the pale vermin anymore. He and his prey didn't move. Unsure of what was going to happen, he dared not turn his head to look. Soon, the smell percolated past the wafting smoke. Tarko could identify them by smell alone as they got closer. He recognized the powerful, heady smell of a joined female pair. Churn and Scow, his clan leaders. The Alphas had arrived. Tarko withered, caught intentionally disobeying their explicit directions. They had come all this way just to fetch him. The effort required on their part was liable to leave them tired and short-tempered. Tarko figured the two of them were more likely to hurt him than the three softlings in front of him. He nearly leaped at his prey right then. That would surely be suicide. If the softlings didn't kill him, the alphas probably would afterward. He spent a moment weighing the action's merit. A claw landed on his shoulder, then a second on his other shoulder. He nearly winced at their touch, his coiled muscles winding yet tighter. A single word oozed out of Churn's nostrils, her voice so low in frequency it was both felt and heard. Something veiled and threatening without Churn even having to open her jaws to speak. Come. Slowly, gingerly, Tarko followed them back to the other side of the fire. Both Churn and Scow walking on their hind legs, asserting their dominance and regal superiority to him in front of the softlings, forcibly making him subservient to them in front of his most hated foes. It both infuriated and frustrated Tarko. Once out of earshot, they started in on him. You insolent hatchling! You young, dumb upstart! Tarko looked into the distance, his eyes staring off into the darkness somewhere between the horizon and where the ring of firelight ended, refusing them to let them be the focus of his eyes, not paying them any more heed than he must. Churn continued for Scow. We can't afford to lose you. You may be overeager, but you also hold promise. You are at the forefront of your generation. Even if you don't lead them, you still bring them motivation. Scow took over. Yes, these creatures are a threat to us. Things are getting tough for us, for the entire clan. Fewer eggs are hatching than they used to. We still aren't comfortable with your ideas. We think it is a risk we need not take. But if you are going to be this stupid about it, running off on your own to face down their horde. He trailed off and looked over his shoulder at the three softlings still standing at the entrance to their cave. Despite your insolence, you are too valuable to risk losing.
Every member of the crush is too valuable these days. If you're going to insist on doing this, then wait a couple of days. We'll do it another night together, as a clan.
Churn added,
Provided the heat holds for a few more days while we gather our strength.
her mate continued.
We'll get inside their hive, make a mess of things. We'll hurt them badly.
The anger oozing into his voice, too, his instinctual bloodlust taking over. Churn wanted to get things over with before her counterpart got out of hand, too.
Come on. They are smart enough to communicate. Let's go apologize, and maybe they won't suspect anything in the coming days.
Her hand still on his shoulder, Churn led Tarko back toward the three softlings still on the other side of the fire, guarding their nest. They stood face to face again, and the disgust and hatred creeping back into Tarko's heart. Churn grew impatient as Tarko got lost in thought over the small, strange bipeds. She stamped a clawed foot, settling all her weight onto one leg. Tarko felt the force of her stamp through the stone they stood on. Tarko slowly and solemnly apologized for killing one of their number. Speaking forced and weak words, heartfelt or not, it was an apology. He wasn't sure if they would have understood him, even if it had been more sincere. It was enough to satisfy the Alphas, at least. Churn led him away from them before someone tried something stupid as the tension continued to rise. She motioned for Tarko to lead. The night was cooler now, and he struggled to gain traction with his wings, but he got airborne. The darkness swallowed him from sight as the three took off together. He guided his Alphas home, hiding his mischievous satisfaction. He had won. His will was becoming law, and he hadn't even given the orders. It was not a single massive victory, but a step in the right direction. He had forced their hand. Maybe he could wrestle leadership from them someday, and not have to do things underhanded.